G'day retro gaming geeks, back again for another episode of Skitchy's Arcade Bunker. Today we're diving into some arcade and console emulation on the Raspberry Pi, and in particular trying to make it the most authentic experience as possible by connecting it all up to an old-fashioned CRT television.
Thanks for returning to my channel. If you'd like to jump right into seeing my new CRT retro gaming setup featuring an old Bang & Olufsen TV, a 2-player arcade panel, a Raspberry Pi and a fantastic little RGB-Pi SCART cable and OS, then jump forward to the 8-minute mark. Otherwise, stick around here and I can first give you some background on what has led me down this CRT rabbit hole. As you have seen in my previous videos, I love old computers and consoles, ideally on original hardware. There is of course an alternative to original hardware that is generally less expensive: emulation. A dirty word for some, however, given that original hardware is slowly dying out and old games are being lost to the sands of time, emulation serves to preserve these old systems for future generations to come. It must be 15 years since I first tried MAME on my old modded OG Xbox to play old arcade games. MAME has come a long way since then, as has the emulation of many different systems. However, in my experience, it has never been anywhere near as authentic as playing on original hardware. About 12 months ago, I thought it about time to revisit emulation to see how far things have come along. I have to say, what I found blew me away. I came across various YouTube videos of DIY arcade machines running software like Emulation Station and Hyperspin, and these looked awesome. So I did some digging around to see what it would take to build my own. While many of these machines run on full PC hardware, I was surprised to find just how capable a 30-pound Raspberry Pi could be. A little more digging around and I came across a Pi image named 256GB Kitchen Sink Retro Pi, containing a whopping 25,000 game images for dozens of different systems, from the Atari 2600 through to the Sega Dreamcast and PS1. So I set about downloading and burning the kitchen sink image onto an SD card, plugged in the Raspberry Pi, plugged it into a cheap arcade stick, then connected it up to a 40-inch plasma TV, and just like that, it was up and running. The state of emulation has come a very long way indeed. I was impressed by the range of machines supported and the overall audio performance and video frame rate. However, something was still not quite right. My brain kept telling me that this was a fake version of my childhood memory of playing these old machines. Arcade machines back in the 80s and 90s did not have big wide flat panel displays. Instead, they used chunky 4:3 ratio CRT monitors. You can see here a comparison from the excellent My Life in Gaming channel. On the right, showing the equivalent of how an old game appears on a modern screen, and on the left the same game on an old CRT monitor. Some may prefer the image on the right, but the memories I'm wanting to relive look like the ones on the left. While the Pi does have an option to output composite video via the 3.5mm DIMM socket, this signal type is not ideal. Here you can see another comparison from the My Life in Gaming channel demonstrating composite output compared to the other options, with the best being RGB. By the way, if you've not already done so, then please check out the My Life in Gaming channel. I highly recommend their RGB 101 series that deep dives into all aspects of retro gaming on modern and old hardware, while providing easy to understand demonstrations of some pretty tech heavy topics. So the search was on for a solution for outputting an RGB 240p signal from a Raspberry Pi to a CRT TV. It turns out there are a number of options available today. Another channel I highly recommend checking out is Retro RGB. The chap who produces that channel does a fantastic job of covering all the latest developments in retro CRT gaming. I'll link in the description below to a video where he summarises a range of options. This video really helped me decide which solution was best for me. In the end, the approach I decided to go for is called RGBPi, a very clever, comprehensive yet cheap solution. User ATG developed the idea 3 years ago, and since then has released a number of revisions to a very active RGBPi community on Discord. RGBPi comprises of two parts: a custom SCART cable that plugs into the Pi's GPIO port, and a custom Pi operating system build. The cost is around €28 and took around 7 days for delivery to the UK. The Pi's GPIO port natively carries an RGB signal. The RGBPi SCART lead connects to the GPIO and has a small PCB built into the SCART plug that provides an 18-bit RGB signal without conversion. The PCB also generates a clean C-Sync signal while producing the highest possible signal quality and the lowest signal loss. The SCART cable also includes 2 filtered audio channels. RGBPi actually comes in 2 flavours now, SCART and Jammer. The Jammer version is a new addition and allows for simple connection to an existing arcade machine. I'm not going to cover the Jammer version today, and instead will focus on the SCART version. As I previously mentioned, RGBPi is not just the special SCART cable. It also includes a custom Pi OS build based upon Recallbox. This is called RGB-Pi OS. The interface of standard emulation software for Raspberry Pi, such as RetroPie or Emulation Station, are designed for 1080p widescreen output and do not scale well and are difficult to use on old 400-line CRTs. The interface of RGB-Pi OS, however, is specifically designed for 240p output and looks retrotastic on old CRT monitors. RGB-Pi's mission is to achieve pixel perfection. Therefore, another very important feature of its OS is the inclusion of a database of settings for each console and arcade ROM. This ensures original timings and refresh rates are maintained, making the video output near indistinguishable from the original hardware. The system is plug and play and needs no configuration. Simply burn the OS to a micro SD card, load up a thumb drive with ROMs, insert both into your Pi, then plug in the SCART cable, and that's it, you're off and running. In part 2 of this video, I'm going to demo the RGBPi interface along with some gameplay. In the first part of this video, I stepped through my journey over the last 12 months that has led me to my new CRT Retrogaming emulation setup with RGBPi at the heart of it. Now let's take a closer look at RGBPi OS. Right, so here you see the selection of systems supported by RGBPi. Currently it supports about 34 consoles and handhelds, as well as a huge number of arcade machines. There are many system-wide options that can be configured via the top menu. Here in the display menu is a neat calibration tool for fine-tuning the screen output size. The sound menu has plenty of features, so to show this off I'm switching to my recently acquired Bang & Olufsen TV, which has much better sound. Perfect for some nostalgia-inducing background music playlists that come baked into RGBPi OS. Here you can see a selection of audio equalizer presets. Or fine-tune your own settings with this neat graphic equalizer so that you can recreate that bass-heavy sound of the 80s games arcades. RGB-Pi is not only pixel perfection, it's audio perfection too. Bluetooth pairing is simple in the controls menu. This menu includes a button mapping utility with handy reference showing the different button names and colours across different systems. Quickly skipping through the other menus, we have settings for Wi-Fi, languages, custom background art, and something I really appreciate, a simple method for keeping the system updated. Right, now to take a look at some gameplay. There's a few ways to scroll through your vast library of games. Holding the joystick in the down direction gradually speeds through the list. Pressing the X button toggles the artwork. Joystick left and right skips a page at a time. The coin button skips through to the next letter in the alphabet. Now for some Outrun gameplay. This is the original arcade version.
Get ready.
And some Robocop, again, arcade version. It's obviously a bit tricky trying to capture a CRT, but believe me, on a PVM, the picture is gorgeous. Here's R-Type on arcade. Moving on from arcade emulation, how about some console emulation? Here's Super Mario Bros. On the NES. And the Neo Geo with Metal Slug.
Mission 1, start. Heavy machine gun.
A fun additional built-in feature is the ability to play video files. Obviously it wouldn't be retro to watch The Mandalorian, but how about some old Looney Tunes? Now, my 14-inch PVM is a lovely display, but after seeing how fantastic the whole RGBPi setup is, I felt the need to purchase something a bit bigger. So I took to eBay and came across this lovely 25-inch Bang & Olufsen BO-Vision 1. You can see how surprisingly thin this TV is. Well, maybe not by today's standards, but for a CRT, it's remarkable. To my surprise, it came with the original Selfridges receipt from 25 years ago, a whopping £3,500. I can guarantee my wife would have killed me if I'd paid that. Thankfully, the seller was happy to accept £50 for it. Happy days. So, RGBPi, check. Decent CRT, check. There was one thing I needed to complete the perfect setup, a decent arcade stick. While tempting it may be to build a full-size stand-up arcade cabinet, or maybe retrofit a second-hand candy cab, for now this 2-player arcade stick I built will do the job. I may make a follow-up video at some point on the parts I used to assemble it. Suffice to say, I could not be happier with the finished product, and the kids love it too.
Tommy's in love. Oh yeah. Oh man. Oh, cake. I'm in love with cake.
Lastly, there's one more thing to show off. RGBPi includes an option to rotate the screen. This allows pixel perfection to be achieved on games that were originally played with the monitor in vertical position, such as Donkey Kong, Pac-Man and Galaga. The future of RGBPi looks bright, with lots of exciting developments in the pipeline, including Raspberry Pi 4 compatibility, a new interface based upon pixel art skins, and what I'm most looking forward to, G-Con 3 light gun support. Well, that's about it for this video. I'm sure there's plenty more to talk about. So if you have any questions, then please post in the comments below and I'll do my best to respond. Any feedback would be useful too, as some aspects I've discussed are outside my area of expertise, so corrections are warmly welcomed. I'm so pleased with my emulation setup. I now have a huge catalogue of old games to explore, to relive and to discover. The arcade joystick, the buttons, the TV, the sound, the images, it all feels so perfect. And it's already provided hours of fun for myself and my mates and my kids. One day I may construct a full-size arcade cabinet with a CRT. However, for now, I'm very content with my little retro arcade bunker. Thanks for watching, see you next time.